Welcome back to another exciting episode of Glitch, Grind, Glow, where we're dedicated to empowering and educating entrepreneurs, tech founders, and professionals by shining the light on the intersection of technology, innovation, and leadership. We aim to provide listeners with insightful conversations, real-world advice, and inspiring stories from industry leaders, helping our community navigate challenges, seize opportunities, and thrive in tech spaces where diversity is often underrepresented. Our mission is to spark growth, resilience, and excellence, helping our listeners glitch the system, grind towards success, and glow with the confidence to lead. In this exciting episode, from Chalkboards to Chatbots, navigating the new classroom, we will explore how AI and machine learning are revolutionizing the education system. Today, we are joined by Claudio Sanchez, a former educator and NPR education correspondent with decades of experience reporting on the U.S. education system. With him is Dr. Brian Robinson, Senior Analyst of Policy and Evaluation at Bellwether, a national nonprofit organization dedicated to transforming the education system. Together, they will help us understand the profound impact of these technologies on classrooms, teachers, and students. We'll discuss not only the potential benefits, but also the challenges and ethical considerations incorporating AI in education. This conversation is critical as it addresses the future of learning and the role technology will play in shaping the next generation. Before we dive into today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and share this podcast with anyone who's ready to level up in their tech journey. Your support helps us to continue bringing these conversations to our community. So let's get started. Okay, so to kick things off, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself? Tell us your background and anything that excites you or is interesting about this topic that we're discussing today. So we'll start with you first, Claudio.
Thanks, Candace, and thank you for inviting us. I grew up along the U.S.-Mexico border in a little tiny border town on the Mexico-Arizona border. And since I was a child, I guess I tried to understand the world I was in a sense, and realize that, the border is not really the U.S. or Mexico. And through my high school years, I wrote a lot for class, not for publication. And that has followed me since because it has helped me understand my own notion of identity, how it impacts my work, including in this topic of technology. Mm-hmm. We are all social beings on this platform we call social media, and much of that has to do with how we define ourselves. So because of my passion for writing, it brought me to National Public Radio eventually, where I was really more an immigration reporter than an education reporter. But the more I covered schools, the more I realized I was covering immigrant families, immigrant children, non-English speaking children throughout this country. And so it was a marriage of two concepts that I really felt I could report on. In many ways, because I identified with that. I used to say, there, but for the grace of God go I. When I saw children struggling in immigrant communities, or when I saw parents struggling with their children. And so it has kind of helped me define myself, not just as an education reporter, but as someone who has that insight to try and bring people's stories to the public. And over the 30 years that I reported on education, I've covered my share of technology stories, but I would never say that I became an expert, certainly, or that well-versed. And to me, technology is still an open question,
Right.
That I live with every day.
So that's very interesting. I want to definitely delve into something as it relates to 30 years that you were in the journalism industry, and obviously probably even a little bit longer than that since you're retired after 30 years. But I mean, your insight continues to carry forward. What would you say from your perspective the impacts of technology on journalism, and what, from your experience, like navigating journalism for that many decades and technological advances, what was that like?
Well, I always try to remind people that when I began reporting at National Public Radio, I was working on a typewriter with carbon paper because we needed to make 3 copies of my script that would go to the producer and to the editor. And that should give you an idea of, how far we've come, so that my last few years at National Public Radio, I couldn't imagine doing a story without the internet, without the research tools that technology provides, without the facility with which I could record people's voices and the ambience in which I was doing my story. When I was sending stories along telephone lines, wow, I remember having to go to a public telephone booth, which don't exist anymore.
Right.
Unscrewing the speaker of that telephone, and clipping what we used to call alligator clips to the phone to feed the audio back to National Public Radio.
That's amazing.
And, if you were to describe that today to people, it's unbelievable that was the way we did our work.
Right.
And to think that today you press a button and you can send whatever you want, pictures, images, audio, anywhere in the world.
Right.
It's mind-boggling.
Yeah.
And if you want to see an industry that's been changed by that, you can look at journalism, because it has made information accessible now.
Right.
It is no longer a matter of waiting for that feed from somewhere in Casper, Wyoming to come through.
Right.
And so it's transformative. And as a person, as a journalist, of course, it transforms you as well, your thought process.
Awesome. I do want to, delve into, so right now, very pro technology. I do want to understand, later, we'll get to this later in the conversation. Were there any cons to, the onset of technology throughout your career? But we'll get there. So Dr. Brian Robinson, thank you for being here. And just tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Thanks for having me. So I am originally from Baltimore, and my career, I guess it's been kind of a long and winding one. Well, not long, but a winding one. So I actually started, I went to Evanston Westside High School in Baltimore, and my trade there was media production. It was a vocational school, so media production. So I actually studied journalism, and I worked at I was part of a program at my local ABC affiliate, where we did a monthly teen newscast. So I started with an interest in journalism as young as high school. And then when I got to Maryland, I thought I was going to, USC Maryland College Park, where I did my undergrad, I thought I was going to be a journalism major. But journalism, the School of Journalism is limited enrollment. And so you can apply to Maryland and you get in, but if you don't get into the journalism school, then you have to pick another major or pick another school. And so I applied, didn't get into the journalism school, and so ended up doing communication as my major instead, because it was the closest thing to journalism that they offered. And so I was a communication major. I still studied social, political rhetoric as my communication track. And then when I graduated, I thought I was going to go into speech writing or press secretary, public affairs, that kind of a career path. But when I graduated, it was 2008, 2009, I had the Great Recession of '08, and jobs were limited, and because the DC area is just so competitive, and jobs were so scarce, I ended up going into teaching, which was supposed to be just a temporary thing. I had applied to a teaching fellowship that I learned about at a career fair, got accepted. Thought I was going to do that for a few years and then go into my communication career. But 2 years turned into three, which turned into seven. I got a master's along the way in ed policy and leadership. And then by my seventh year, I was kind of ready to make a transition, do something different. And so I figured out a way to kind of marry my background that I had in teaching, 7 years as a teacher now, and having a master's in ed policy, and then my interest in policy and politics, which I've always had. And then I went to NYU, got my doctorate in ed policy and leadership. And yeah, so I've been in the ed policy and research space for 4 years now, and I've been at Bellwether for about 3.
Awesome. One thing I love about the story and kind of your journey is that your ability to pivot, and then your desire, right, to pivot and to try new things. And I think that's super impressive. And a lot of people can learn from that. It makes you resilient. It makes you, well versed and knowledged across multiple spaces. And one thing that I know, I have a little bit of secret knowledge that Brian was recently appointed to an advisory board for a charter school. So congratulations there. I know it's new and it's fresh and it's happening, but I think that's amazing. And, I can't wait to hear about your journey in that space over the next several years. Awesome. Okay. So one of the things that I like to do on the show is make sure that we spend a little bit of time to get to know you guys a little bit more on a personal level. We'll have our topics, we'll have our discussion about AI and technology, but I kind of want to showcase, more about you guys, on a personal level. So I have icebreaker questions that I brought here today with us. The first one is time travel. If you could go back in time and teach any historical figure a modern subject using today's technology, which historical figure would you pick and what would you teach, discuss, have conversations with them about? I'll start with you, Claudio.
Candace, when I thought about that question, I thought about the importance of invention and inventors since time immemorial. Men and women who have broken through and defied conventional thinking and conventional technology to carve a new path to the future, to bring us to where we are today. And I thought of Leonardo da Vinci, the greatest, if not one of the greatest inventors we've known and know of. And here's a man who, in his time, kind of invented a flying machine and certainly, military weapons, and had this incredible imagination and ability to look at the future, not knowing what it was going to be, but saying, here's what it could be. Right. And going back to Leonardo da Vinci would give me a chance to sit with him and show him a cell phone and what it does. The basic understanding that I have of a cell phone, I think would blow him away. I think people like that who were able to see into the future would still struggle to understand how far we've come. On the other hand, I think that these men and women who were the genius of, the Renaissance, the Industrial Revolution, the technology revolution that we've seen over the years, these are genius, a level of genius that are still here with us. Someone, somewhere today is walking around with an idea that they want to bring to fruition that is going to change our lives. I think that's what happened with cell phones. I think that's what happened with AI. We may have a Hollywood version of what AI is, but the fact that it's already changing our lives, I think people never imagined that we would come this far. And who knows how much farther we're going to go, given that, there are people out there who are thinking these big thoughts. So anyway, Leonardo's my choice, let alone that I I like his paintings.
Yes, I will say that that's the only artist that I've taken a lot of time to kind of delve
Really?
into. They had this amazing display in DC a few years ago that I was able to see, and I thought that was awesome. And like,
Yeah.
I don't know a lot of artists, so I'm just like, that's one of my favorites. So, all right. All right, Dr. Robinson. And let me take a step back. I just want to make sure that how do you want to be referred today there out? Is Dr. Robinson good, or do you want to be Brian? I just want to make sure that.
I mean, Brian's fine. We informal friends.
Okay. All right. I'm just making sure. Yeah. All right. So tell me a little bit more about you. He's not requiring me to call him Dr. Robinson. So that's a very down to earth.
Yeah. So I think, we were talking earlier about just like navigation, and about how, we all use GPS pretty much go anywhere now. It's in our phones, it's built to our cars. And before that, we print off MapQuest pages, and whoever was riding shotgun was in charge of making sure that we made the right turns and the left turns.
Yeah.
And before that, it was the maps, right? Actual paper maps, and you had to know north, south, east, west, and all the things. But before all of that, people kind of had to figure it out. And so the historical figure that I thought about was explorers like Ferdinand Magellan, who was the first person to circumnavigate the globe, and I guess it was the 1600s. And they had got lost at sea several times, and bad weather. It took journeys that they thought were going to take days, and it ended up taking months. People got sick. It was just a treacherous journey. And I think, so it was like, imagine if they had this technology that, we had, would have made their journeys, quicker, safer. And so I think that would have been really interesting. But at the same time, it's like, thanks to their, work and their ability or their, willingness to kind of just go out there and explore the world unknown to what was out there, we now kind of benefit from that.
Absolutely. One of the things that I know, I discuss this all the time. I have, 14-year-old godchildren, and sometimes I have to ask them, I'm like, hey, so do you know how to get home from here without like GPS? Like, do you know how to navigate just around your own neighborhood? If the street's blocked off, are you going to just pull out your phone, or do you have several ways? And one of the things that I thought was really cool when I was younger was my mom did force me to use a map. And my mom also forced me a lot of times to get lost. So we would do these trials where we would just turn down a random street and see where it brought us out. And one of the things that I did learn was that eventually, if you keep driving far enough, you're going to find some place that you are more familiar with. You could be very far away from your original, from your embarkation point. But eventually I was going to find somewhere that I knew, because my mom had spent so much time trying to challenge me to learn my surroundings and learn how to navigate, learn how to use a map. But obviously we didn't have like GPS when I was, 7 and 8. There weren't GPSs riding around in the car with us. So we had no other option. But my godkids, I'm scared for them, because if their phone dies or they don't have access to something like that, I don't know if they're going to figure their way out of it. So
yeah, I know. I just think like the whole I'm not anti like tech or even anti AI. I think that there's a place for it, and there is opportunities for it to help us do our jobs and just our daily ways of living that, are far beyond things we could probably even imagine right now.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, technology will inevitably fail. Your cell phone will be in an area where the service is not great, or it will die, or your laptop will die, and Absolutely. It's like, okay, well, what are you going to do then? How are you going to be able to manage? And, to your point, there's a whole generation out there that couldn't tell you north, south, east, west.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And they would be lost.
I have seen it.
So that's, I think, a challenge.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. I love the answers to that one. So one other icebreaker before we kind of delve into today's topics. I call this question superpower syllabus. So if there was a superpower that you could use for whatever, communication, your day-to-day job, whatever, you want to explore, what superpower would you have and why? So we'll start with you, Claudio.
For me, it's simple. I'd like to tell the future.
Okay.
I'd like to have the power to envision what's going to happen 15 minutes, 20 minutes, maybe a day or two ahead of time.
Okay.
Not into the far future. That might be a little too scary.
Right. I think 15 minutes into the future is scary too, but
well, I'm talking about facilitating my day to day. Now I don't know how that would work, but to me, that is a no-brainer. I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
Let me tell the future.
Yeah.
Let me expect or know what to expect within the next certain amount of time.
All right, that's a good one. What about you?
So I
Brian?
actually thought about this question in the context of teaching, and as a former teacher, and like one of the things that I wish I could have done is just like snap my fingers and have a lesson plan.
Yeah.
That's an interesting power.
That is absolutely an
And it's funny because again, to bring it all full circle, it's like as a teacher now, you can ask ChatGPT to create a lesson plan for you.
Yeah.
For anything. And it is the closest thing that you're going to get as a teacher to the superpower.
Yeah. Yeah.
Of being able to snap your fingers and have a lesson plan.
Right.
There's, challenges with that. I'm sure we'll talk about them. But I think just the ability, to, how much time you're going to save doing with that kind of ability. Even to get you a framework to get you started,
Right.
Doesn't AI do that?
Yeah.
ChatGPT.
Absolutely.
See, that tells you how much I know about AI.
Right. No, it's absolutely like I use ChatGPT for everything at this point in my life, and it's pretty sad, actually.
For you.
Yeah. Can you tell me how to write this email where I really want to tell this person to tell themselves off or go somewhere, but I want you to rephrase it in a way that's like, polite and professional? But I'll put anything. Luis will tell you I'll put anything into ChatGPT to see what their suggestion is before I go forward with whatever I'm doing.
See, when I taught a couple of years, middle school and elementary. My answer to not having a plan or a lesson was to just leave the classroom, take the kids outside to the park, and call that a lesson plan.
Right. Be like, what are we learning today, guys?
Right.
What are we learning?
I know. And I mean, I can't imagine you having something do it for you.
Right.
It's amazing.
Yeah. And so, I mean, this is a great bridge, actually, because I know that there's been a lot of news and information, and I understand how software engineering, that's my background industry. The onset of ChatGPT and, and all of the technologies that are surrounding, there's a lot of other open source AI. It's not just ChatGPT. Everybody's trying to build one, right? Mm-hmm. And everybody's pushing out their technology. And as soon as this started happening, people were like, it's going to take our jobs. And this is scary. And, I've had a lot of debates with other software engineers, about, no, it's not going to take our jobs. It's going to change the landscape of our jobs. So we're here. We're at that point of the day. So I'm like, let's talk about, AI and education, and kind of from both of your perspectives, from either the policy making perspective or just the general teaching perspective. What are your thoughts about AI entering the educational arena? So we'll start with you, Claudio, and whatever your approach is to this question,
Let me, and I, in thinking about what I know about AI, which is not a lot, I actually have to step back and think about the bigger picture. And I jotted down some bullet points and asked myself, because of technology, learning and schooling are on a collision course, in my view, and have been. The question is why? So, because of the foundation of education is seen as a human endeavor, human interaction. Get those machines out of here. Because schools are slow or unwilling to adapt to promising new pedagogy that relies on technology, that shows you. I mean, one great research project that I reported on many years ago was, has the computer helped kids write better? And it turned out that yes, even though people thought, even parents thought, no, that's going to kill your penmanship.
Right.
It's really going to do terrible things to your imagination, your creativity. On the contrary, kids being able to move their text around and write freely without having to use an eraser gave kids more freedom to write and to write creatively. And I think that surprised a lot of people early on. We're talking about the 90s, late 80s. But I also think that the fear of technology and certainly this clash of cultures, technology and schooling, was because technology has always been viewed as disruptive, very disruptive. It threatens the status quo. It threatens jobs or the old ways. And there's a myth that technology replaces parents and teachers. You're going to have a robot, a machine take over. I think also we're fearful because we hear stories of how technology has failed or overpromised. I did a story out of Columbus, Ohio, where Apple had come in and done wall-to-wall technology, computers, data banks, you name it, into this pretty middle-class school district in Columbus. And even though it looked very impressive, it was very disappointing because the technology had not been adapted to the curriculum, to learning styles. I mean, there were so many questions that Apple, which had donated tons of money, pretty much it died on the vine. The other unintended consequence was that they chose a school where African American and Hispanic kids were the minority. So there were schools all over the city with more majority minority kids. And they're going, okay, now, why aren't you bringing your technology to us? It became a huge point of concern that technology could create even more problems of leaving kids out, discrimination, and outright bigotry, because that was not being invested in communities that needed them most.
Right.
So anyway, that has helped taint, I think, the problems that we all see today and that we've seen over the years. And then there's the obvious issue of school politics, decisions that are political. And you will, if you haven't already, you may end up realizing how bad that can get, Brian. I hope not. But it's the fact that, you know, with or without technology, schools depend on budgets, on political decisions about what kids should be reading, as we're hearing more these days, and on union contracts. Teachers who are, rightfully so, protecting their jobs, and even though they feel they've been marginalized in many cases by technology. So there's that. There's the political decisions that interfere. And finally, let me just wrap this up. I think schools operate in a time warp out of the real world. Educators, I think, forget that children and teens are learning more outside school in a world that schools can't control.
Absolutely.
And that's an enormous problem. One last thing I'll throw in is that there are exceptions. There are success stories. There was a program out of Chicago that I followed for many months called the Estrella Project. They gave laptops to kids in South Texas who were migrant kids traveling to Illinois to detassel corn, to pick crops. And because these kids lost so much of their academic year traveling, so Toshiba came up with a great laptop at the time, really sturdy, that these kids could travel with, so that when they arrived in their destination to pick crops with their parents, you know, they did not lose any time academically. They were tethered to a network in Texas that would still require that they fulfill the academic requirements of the curriculum. These were all high school kids. all with dreams of leaving the life they had and making it into college. Now, without technology, that would have been so much harder. And I thought that is where technology transforms things, not just education, but people and people's lives. The other examples are Apple and Columbus, although it had its faults. George Lucas, I remember a story out of Los Angeles. George Lucas gave I think it was the Los Angeles Independent School District, a new way to teach biology in 8th grade. And what he did was he took a visor where he put a film of kids in a swamp, where virtual reality essentially gave kids in this 8th grade class a chance to, with no swamp near 400 miles, go into a swamp and look at life inside a swamp.
That's awesome.
Virtual reality. And I thought, my God, what is it you can't do with this technology? And the chance for kids at that age in the inner city who maybe have never traveled more than 5-10 miles beyond their doorstep, the chance to travel the world to learn about not just biology, but about history, about math, about other cultures and, things that have happened in the past, and that can give these kids a sense of what the future is likely to look like. Anyway, I've rambled on too much here, but to me, these are the things that I love to report on because they both looked at the problems as well as the solutions.
Absolutely. So, Claudio, I've heard, great use cases and, metrics in terms of like all of the pros. Are there any cons from your experience from the infusing technology or the intersection of technology and education that you've seen over all these years that you've been reporting?
By cons, I'm assuming you mean...
Or challenges.
Challenges, very much so.
Yeah.
And one that comes to the forefront for me is the training of teachers with technology. Remember that we're talking about a generation of teachers. I don't know what the average age is these days, but these are not teachers that grew up with technology necessarily. Obviously, there is another incoming generation that did. And sometimes, depending on your workforce at a school, you have teachers who are very resistant to technology. Right. Not because they hate it or because they don't like it or because of any other reason other than the fact that they have not been trained.
Right.
And if you look at the typical school district training budget for technology, it's minimal. It's almost nothing. They spend more money. Schools tend to spend more money on metal detectors than they do on trainers who will kind of help teachers feel at ease with technology. And that to me stands out as one of the enormous problems. Remember that the cons against technology in schools also have to do with the public perception of technology. I've always thought that, social media, as we know it today, has poisoned the attitudes towards technology because inappropriate content, privacy concerns. I mean, there are so many hurdles in the view, I think, of most parents who just want their kids to be safe and want their kids to learn and be able to have a path towards higher education if that's down the road. But we all get caught up in these perceptions of technology that are not just inaccurate, but I think scary.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't see the technology sector. I don't know that much about it. I don't know what big corporations like Apple, Microsoft, and whatever other enormous organization or business out there is promoting certain technologies in schools. But I know that they're not doing enough to ease the fear and to reassure people that what they're introducing into the classroom is going to benefit their kids. And I think that's a big problem.
Yeah, I agree. The training aspect of, technology, and even like now with the onset of AI and machine learning, even technology companies have a hard time training their people on what's the acceptable use and what's a compliant way to use AI. I'm in the middle of a training course. My company is a technology company. It's an infrastructure company. And like they even struggle to create a curriculum for us because, we're all technologists, but it's hard.
That because it's changing so fast?
Absolutely.
I mean, that's
Absolutely.
a big factor that the next week or month or year,
right,
whatever you were using is now obsolete. So you're going to have to do something else or train for something else.
Yeah. And so the one thing that I want to ground this discussion in from an AI perspective is that AI is not new. Right. AI has been in existence for several decades. It's just how we are giving the AI to the public is what is new, right? In terms of if you wanted to go build an artificial intelligence machine and you had the underlying computer science knowledge, you could go build one, right? And you could train it. And you could see what it does and what it doesn't do. And there are lots of people who are doing that in their basements as technologists. But now we're building solutions and handing them to the public. And we're not putting any safeguards or any checks and balances on them. And that's what's really scary because students using, AI to do homework and there's no checks and balances and there's nothing that's kind of making the solutions compliant and no standardization. So like we'll touch on that in a few minutes because I did recently do a short form video about different types of technology that are trying to catch students, like using AI without any checks and balances. Yeah. So I want to know from your perspective, Brian, like AI entering the education arena. What does that mean to you? And like, what do you foresee in terms of policy and future, right?
Yeah, so a couple of things. I'm going to try not to ramble or sound incoherent either. But I think the first thing, kind of to go back to the original, I guess, foundation of the conversation about the role of the educator and the job of the educator, is I think that's something that we have to keep in mind is that like, education is like inherently about relationships, right? Relationships between teachers and students, relationships among students and among teachers. And that's something that you cannot replace with a chatbot, right? So you can have, and there are chatbots that you can ask a question and it'll give you an answer, but like it can't tell if you're having a bad day. Right. And sometimes, kids have bad days and that bad day can, can set the tone for the rest of the day and what they learn or don't learn. And so, things like that. So I think, to the extent that AI or, technology can enhance or support teaching and supplement teaching and teaching, the role of the teacher, it will do that. But to being able to replace the teacher, I think it's not a word that I see. Because of the nature of relationships and relationship building, that is really an important aspect of the job as a whole. So I think some of the other points I wanted to make about just where AI can be helpful and supportive. There's a lot of excitement around AI's ability to support personalized learning, for example. And so that's basically this idea that schooling has for so long been this kind of one size fits all, one size fits most model. And, there are kids that get lost in that, of course, because they don't fit into that one size fits all, one size fits most model. And so the ability to be able to kind of create a personalized learning, experience for each student that keeps up with the student's learning pace, where the student is academically, and can kind of tailor instruction to meet the needs of that particular student. And so that's not new either. I mean, it's been, iReady, for example, a math program that, helped kids that, is basically the adaptive technology where, you get an answer correct, you get a more challenging problem the next time. You get it wrong, it takes you back to some foundational problems to try to figure out where you're missing the mark and how to correct that. But I think like this idea of like generative AI, and being able to kind of not just adapt to where kids are, but also to being able to figure out, okay, why are kids struggling? Where are they struggling? How do we help them and in real time and course correct? Is something that is new and interesting. And one product that's coming to mind in particular, is this product. It's called Quill, and it is a writing, it's just a writing technology. And so what happens is kids are, they're writing and the technology gives them real time feedback, right? Add more evidence here. This is great, but here's where you could be stronger. And so it gives kids real time feedback, something that a teacher would have to take home 25, 30 essays and go spend hours going one by one, and providing that feedback with the red pen, that now, the technology can do for the teacher. Teacher can walk around and supervise, but and so in that instance, the technology is supporting the teacher, right? It's providing the teacher with, providing the students with that real-time feedback, and then the teacher can go around and support each student individually as they are writing, as they are responding to the feedback that's been given to them. But then you have challenges that, the technology can't really necessarily support at the moment, right? So for example, if you're a student doing a math problem, and you get the answer wrong, did you get it wrong because you made a error? Did you forgot to carry the one?
Right.
Or is there something that you're not understanding conceptually about when you need to carry the one, and why you're carrying the one? And so that is area where, I think, you still need a human, right? And so I think there's this idea that technology, AI, et cetera, great, can be supportive, but you need to keep humans in the loop, right? You need to keep humans in the decision-making process. Because at the end of the day, that human is responsible for what happens with that student and that student's learning progression. If a student doesn't meet proficiency by the end of the year, you can't say, well, the chatbot didn't do it.
Right.
It's you.
Yeah.
You're the teacher. You're the one that's responsible for making sure that kids are learning. And so, I think that's something that we kind of have to keep in mind. And I think another challenge is that, like you said, we've been doing, or generative AI, or AI is not new, but the accessibility of it to the masses is what's new. But there's a lot that we don't know about the effectiveness of some of these things that we're trying to, put into schools. And so I think, I'd be very hesitant to do anything at scale without really understanding how it will impact students and schools. I was talking with a school leader a while back, and they were really excited about the possibility of kids not even needing to learn how to write because AI can do it for you, and you can.
That's scary.
About grammar, because
that goes to journalism jobs.
Right. All of us are out the door.
AI can do the grammar, can correct the grammar for you too.
Right.
And I was like, that's not what we want.
Right.
We want kids to know how to write. We want kids to be able to know, to be able to write a grammatically correct sentence and why it's grammatically correct or why it's grammatically incorrect. We want kids to be able to think critically. And so I just think, there's a lot we don't know. And I would be very cautious about trying to have AI replace skills that we want kids to be able to develop and learn, and jobs and roles that we want teachers to be able to fulfill, as well. I had one more point, can't remember what it was, but did I answer your question?
Absolutely. You absolutely answered the question, because those are all the things. And I think it's so interesting because the things that you're saying from an education, from a reporting, journalism perspective, I think this is every industry where people are looking across the space and saying, will it replace our jobs? And everybody's saying no, right? At the end of the day, it'll help. It'll aid you in certain areas, but there's still checks and balances that have to be put in place to understand what's coming back from the technology and how it should be applied.
There's
Case by
something
case.
counterintuitive, going back to some of the points that Brian was making, that for many years, I don't know about today, but it was well known, there was a lot of coverage of this, the leaders of technology, the big, founders in Silicon Valley, who had kids, didn't send their kids to schools with a lot of technology.
Right.
In fact, there were a handful of some of these entrepreneurs who said, I don't want any technology in my kid's school. I want them to learn the classics. I want them to learn reading. I want them to be
Right.
great readers and writers. And the last thing they wanted was technology. Now, these are the gurus, right? The
Right.
entrepreneurs that were pushing all
The
certainly
technology.
all
They
the
were building all the
technology. I always
solutions.
thought that was interesting because I think it said something about the need to really anchor technology to very, very basic human human beings
Absolutely.
who, whether they have access to technology or not, they have brains. The most incredible computer. And if you don't feed that and ground that intelligence properly, you create an artificial,
Right.
not to be a pun here, an artificial intelligence that is going to be lacking.
Absolutely.
It really is. Let alone the fact that human contact
Yeah.
is what kids really benefit from.
Yeah, absolutely. And and I don't even need to be an educator to understand that there's no replacement for trying to figure out what's going on with somebody's inability to learn or absorb or to be present in your classroom. There will never be an AI solution for that. And I'll say never, right? So I challenge someone to build that solution because, I was part of an internship that I had in college. I went into Brooklyn Park Middle School and I was a teacher aide in, that particular school for, 8 months. And that was really hard, was just like trying to figure out what was going on with my students day to day, because yesterday she was fine. Today she can't keep her head off the desk. She's, falling asleep and not at all paying attention. Or next week she's missing from school all week, right? And those are the things where you have to still put that care and concern and then figure out how to, if it's a problem absorbing the material, AI might be able to tell me different things to try for explanation, but I have to work through that and feel through that. And I'm, that was my little extent into education in terms of being in the classroom. So I definitely understand that it'll never replace that, and nor should we even try to replace that human element. So bringing us through this thread and kind of pulling on it a little bit more, in your opinion, are there any safeguards that need to be put in place, or what are the ethical considerations that we need to just be cognizant of as people as we're navigating through the space of technology and education, AI and education? I'm going to start with you, Brian. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so that actually made me remember the point I was going to make.
Oh, great. Look at that.
Which was about the policy aspect of it.
Right.
Which, about half of the states have introduced some sort of a policy or guidance, really, for districts and schools for how to safely, responsibly incorporate AI. Mm-hmm. But the safeguards is one of the most critical aspects of it, right? Because data and privacy concerns are huge. And there's federal laws, there's state laws that also kind of govern how you're supposed to handle student data. But I think that's the main thing that people are still trying to figure out.
Yeah.
And how they are going to use these platforms for the benefits that they can bring, right, but also in ways that safely and responsibly protect student data, and also teaching kids who are going to be using the platforms how to responsibly use AI, right?
Yeah.
And so, because we see with social media, set aside AI for a second, how kids post, information they shouldn't, not just like, what explicit or whatever, but even like posting your full name or your address.
Yeah.
Right.
Things
or
that are
phone number, like things that, yeah. And so then there's the issue of like deep fakes and all the things and bullying, cyberbullying. So like all these things, AI can also impact, and so like teaching kids how to responsibly use AI, how to be AI literate. And so if you're going to use AI to help with your classwork, not just taking that, copying that, and is handing in it,
Right.
but also, understanding, not just because that is plagiarism, but also because AI hallucinates. AI, all the information that AI gives you isn't necessarily 100% accurate.
No, it's not.
Right? And so you as a human have to be able to use that judgment and be able to discern whether or not the information you're getting is accurate or not. And so I think there's so many things from safety and data and privacy to ethical uses of AI that have to be considered. And I think that what's happening now is among schools and districts is they're trying to figure out how to kind of balance, we want to be able, this is technology, it's out here. We can't put the genie back in the bottle, right? But also, how can we make sure that that our students and our teachers and our employees are using it in ways that are safe and responsible? And also, how can we use it as to better serve our students in our community, in our school communities? And so, I think one example that we have seen is LAUSD is a good example of a good intent and bad implementation.
Right.
So if your if your viewers are not familiar, LAUSD, or Los Angeles Unified School District, tried to create this chatbot that would help parents navigate information, bus schedules, lunch information, find how to find support for your student if they're struggling academically or with mental health or whatever. It was a great idea. However, they invested like $8 million in this startup company that had no experience creating the chatbot, that created the technology that they wanted. And then that company went, belly up, and they're left with, holding the bag with this platform that they can't even use. So, I think that is one of the challenges too, is like having districts understand like procurement processes and having processes in place for procuring AI technology that can meet the district's goals is something that's also a challenge that needs to be considered, as far as that company also was not necessarily following the data and privacy policies of the district. And California also has one of the strongest privacy and data laws for students in the country. And so, I think those are some of the things that have to be considered. And I think, states are struggling because it's so new and because there's so many different tensions. And then, that's not even to speak of the federal level, which is also struggling. There's been over 140 bills at the federal level that's been introduced to try to address some of these concerns. And there's politics, of course. We know Washington is Washington. But then there's also real concerns about civil rights protections for students, data privacy, as we mentioned, and consumer protections, right? And to the extent that consumers can sue companies who abuse their data. And then there's also states' rights concerns, right? So how much will state laws be preempted by federal laws? So I think there's just a ton of
that's a lot to unpack. That is a whole lot to unpack. And, it's very interesting because it's moving so rapidly. Like you said, it's like today, this technology was version 1.0 and it had these abilities. 6 months from now or 4 months from now, it's 2.0 and it has these new, and we didn't even have enough time to put out legislation for that original version.
One of the problems, and maybe because I'm so skeptical of the solutions or the protections that schools can embrace is because schools are caught up in the larger scheme of things.
Right.
Fake news, technology that not just invades but steals your money, your identity, technology that alienates us. I hate to say it, but schools are not exempt from that. Certainly the journalism world has been, bashed over and over for creating so much political hostility in this country and separating us instead of uniting us around common causes. And schools are in the middle of that. When I think of privacy concerns, kids are vulnerable. They always have been. Are schools good at protecting their information? Bottom line, no.
Right.
There is no sure method for them. They don't have the budgets, and they don't have the training. So, there's so much that we need to resolve that is not being resolved that raises questions about our ability to protect kids, to protect teachers, to give the public schools in particular the credibility they need in order for parents to support them. And like I said, I'm the skeptic because I don't see any answers in sight.
Right. So one of the things that you just touched on, and this is interesting in my opinion, is like, how do we make it equitable, right?
Well, there is little or no research whatsoever. We've all heard of the achievement and the opportunity gap. That came out of research out of, I think it was Indianapolis, that said the problem with learning, or at least with, giving kids the civil right they have to quality education, is because of this perceived achievement gap that is really the result of an opportunity gap. Do these children have the opportunity to learn what, more affluent suburban kids do? Well, the research has shown that that there is a connection to technology in the sense that, and it was in fact a story out of Kentucky. I went to Kentucky to look at distance learning, which was
interesting,
really popular at the time. Alaska, Kentucky, and a few other places. And there was a horrible shortage of science teachers, high school science teachers. And the state didn't know what to do. They couldn't recruit them, paid them nothing, of course, which was the problem. They couldn't recruit enough science teachers. So they came up with the best science teacher in Kentucky teaching a course over television and connecting every single school that didn't have a science teacher, teach their kids long distance on TV. Not the best, but the only technology that was affordable to them.
Right.
Now, did it solve the problem of opportunity? Not entirely. Are you going to learn more from a teacher who's present, who you can go talk to later, who you can even hang out with, whether you're interested in science or not? Or are you going to learn from a talking head on a television screen?
Right. Someone you can interact with.
So technology answers the one question of access. Oh, we got a great teacher on TV teaching technology or teaching science to kids who would otherwise not have a science teacher. But you don't have the teacher, the person who can enrich that experience for the child. So it's half empty, half full. We don't know. And I think a lot of questions about technology these days are half empty, half full. Where or if we're going to find answers to these questions, I don't know.
Yeah, I have no idea either. And again, like, I'm looking at it from a perspective of from my industry. I don't know where the limits and where we draw the line for software and technology companies using, technology to build things, right? Where do we divide that space where it's like, this is okay for the technology to build, and then this is where the human enters? And we haven't figured it out. And, from an equitable, depending on your organization, you can invest in the proprietary software, but these small, startups or small businesses can't invest the same type of money. So it's like, how do we get to a place where they get the same technology and the same availability of AI and machine learning capabilities, equitably distributed across, the world, right?
Let's not forget too that the technology in schools question is not so much about education as it is about economic transformation. This nation's economy, the world's economy, is changing daily, just like technology. And technology is driving that. It's changing everything. Our monetary systems, our how we as either parents or just as people invest money or make a living. And I think people forget that the more narrow question of why is technology important to schools is because we need to educate and prepare the next generation of third graders to the world in which they're going to inherit, where technology is going to determine what kind of job they have, whether they'll be able to make a living,
Right.
a living wage, whether they'll be able to buy a home, a car. I mean, these are big macro questions about technology that are not being addressed in schools.
Absolutely.
Schools are looking at short term, can I get this kid to graduate, whether they're prepared or not. And I think the big economic question is, how is the economy going to drive technology, and technology going to drive the economy so that our kids are prepared?
Absolutely.
I think another point on equity, and is how these platforms are learning, right? Because though I'm not an expert on how they work technically, but big picture is that they learn from the data that is provided to them.
Absolutely.
The
more data, the more they learn.
Exactly. And what is to be said of the data that they are learning on, right? And so if they are learning on data that's rooted in bias, then they are going to be outputting information that is rooted in bias.
Absolutely.
And so that was one of the challenges behind some of the legislation I was talking about before, was whether or not companies will be able to use data generated from AI to make important decisions about who gets admitted into what schools, or who gets opportunity to housing, credit, things like that. And so that's just another whole beast, right? Like, what is being what kind of data is being given to these technology, to these platforms that they're learning on, so that they can provide outputs and help the user on the end make decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a very common problem, again, across all industries. And one of the interesting things that we did a study on for our small business folks a few months ago, when I was teaching small business owners about AI and machine learning, was the famous or infamous, use cases with Google. And I don't want to isolate any one technology company, but training on biased data produces biased results. And we've seen a lot of use cases out in industry where we couldn't get historically accurate images generated. There were things that were happening where they couldn't, if you're doing facial recognition software and you don't train with enough diverse individuals, it can't recognize certain people of certain skin tones and colors, or it disproportionately recognizes them because it didn't have enough training data, right? And it disproportionately picks folks out. And there was a lot of that, when we were dealing with the, January 6th incident, like all of those things where they're trying to use facial recognition technology to find those people. And depending on how that AI was trained, it's going to gloss over those folks, but it might pick out the lack of, the more diverse individuals, right, in that space. And so we've seen use cases like that all over the place, where it's only as diverse as your data set.
Yeah. And getting back to the education space, like if you got a kid who is an English language learner, or they're not proficient in English, whether or not or a student that speaks and writes with an accent,
Absolutely.
or ebonics, what have you. Whether or not those individuals are being able to access and receive the same, be treated the same by this technology as someone who's
Right.
blind.
I would tell a very, and that's funny to me because one of my, and I hope that the people that I work with on my team watch this episode, because there was one day where I was trying to call the help desk at work, and it was one of those automated help systems, and it was asking me questions, and I was answering the questions, and the system could not understand me. And I think I articulate pretty well. I think I speak very clearly. And one of my coworkers walked over and said, let me see what's going on here. And then said the same exact thing that I said to the automated system. And the automated system routed him exactly where it needed to be. And he was like, it's your Baltimore accent. And I said, I don't have a Baltimore accent.
I
First
didn't know
of all,
Baltimore had an accent.
oh, absolutely.
Oh, no,
Absolutely. The twos, the U's, right? But I don't have a Baltimore accent. And he was crying, laughing for like the next few days because he literally took the phone out of my hand, said the same exact thing I said, and he got me to where I needed to be. So that's just one of those things, right? Like, and that technology, and it is AI technology. It's just, it's weak AI.
Yeah.
But it is AI technology that's trying to route me to the right place and get me to the right resolution. And it did not understand me and was not going to help me that day based on, what it was interpreting I was saying. So I think that model wasn't trained on enough diverse data sets to be able to help all the people that could be calling into this help desk. All right. So I have one final question for you guys, just to really understand where we think the world is going. Where do we think, the education arena is going? And as it relates to educational technology, AI, and machine learning, what do you predict are the future trends? So we'll start with you, Claudio.
When I think of AI, and especially in education, I would compare it to drinking from a fire hose. Mm-hmm. It's coming at us too quickly, too fast, and there's too much that we don't know how to deal with it.
Absolutely.
Eventually, we will resolve it. But as we speak right now, I think we're being overwhelmed. Mm-hmm. As part of the larger question about future trends and how to resolve them, I guess my main ones, bullets here, the gap between haves and have-nots, mm-hmm. the tech-rich and the tech-poor, has to be resolved. Now, I question, will one app ever replace one teacher, one tutor, one textbook? I don't know. Big question.
Yep.
Primary sources versus textbook publishers. It's a looming, if it isn't already, it's a looming battle. Primary sources, I think, belong in the classroom, not the interpretation of textbook publishers, which censure and essentially leave out the essence of issues like history. Whether it's the Civil War or World War II, kids are poorer for it mm-hmm. because so much of that content is in the hands of publishers. There needs to be a debate about the need and relevance of K through 12 education as we know it, and higher education, colleges. And that's being driven, I think, by technology breakthroughs in terms of access and affordability. Look at the debate right now about colleges. Is it affordable? No. Do we need a college degree? No. Because there are so many other careers where you don't need one. You don't need to go to a college that costs $50,000 a year in order to get a credential. There are many, many people out there, I think, and that number is growing, of experts, educators who say, do we need credentials at all?
Right.
Will a BA get me the job that I want, or does a BA really reflect the skill level versus someone who went to a junior college or somebody who didn't go to college at all, who happens to be well-educated, right, mm-hmm. without having to have a college degree? There's something, terms that I keep hearing, hyperlearning and telesophy. When I came across these terms, I didn't know what they meant. But basically, it's about the question, will learning anything, anywhere, anytime be a free-for-all, unregulated, or will it be regulated and controlled, and by whom? Mm. That's the debate in Congress these days on everything from TikTok to whatever other trend out there,
Right.
where people are concerned that there should be regulation and others who are concerned that that regulation is going to snuff out innovation.
Absolutely.
So we don't have the answer to that. The other question is, who will create the next generation of tech-rich hybrid schools? Will they be brick and mortar? There are proposals out there to create essentially classrooms on the web where you don't have to leave your house, just like, telecommuting. I mean, you can learn anything, anywhere, anytime, literally on your laptop. And with the right, guidance, you could make schools, brick and mortar schools, obsolete. I mean, in theory. I'm not so sure that's going to happen, at least not in my lifetime. But I think that what we all need to finalize is, what we all need to think about is that for every answer, for everything that we've answered about technology in schools, there are at least 10 more questions that we haven't even tackled.
Absolutely.
And as long as that keeps us honest about what we're getting into, I think we'll be okay. I mean, I think I don't see disaster down the road. We're not talking about the Matrix or anything like that. I think we're looking at a world that is going to be transformed the way it's been transforming in the last generation, and even more so. I'm going to give a final plug here. I have a very dear friend, colleague, education reporter who used to be with USA Today. I think he's now with someone else. He wrote a book called Running with Robots about AI in classrooms. I would recommend it. I haven't read it. It came out recently.
Oh, yeah, that's what I was going to say. So this is a new, recent, like sometime in the last year or so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Running with Robots.
Absolutely. We'll drop the link in the episodes.
And the reporter's name is Greg Toppo.
Okay.
Toppo.
Awesome. We will absolutely drop the link in whatever format that you guys are consuming this in, so that you can try and find that. Awesome. So to you, Brian, future trends, what do you think the landscape looks like?
Yeah, so I think that's a hard question only because a year ago, if you had asked me, I wouldn't have said AI.
Absolutely.
And so I think that's the thing with technology, and like it's just also really crazy to think about how much technology has evolved in the past 20, 25 years. It's like it's so unrecognizable, and every time you think there's nothing else they can possibly give us, they give us something else that we didn't even know we needed or wanted. So I think, I mean, I'll talk about AI specifically and then kind of broader, I guess. But with AI specifically, I think generative AI has been kind of the wave of the past year, which is mainly text, right? It's mainly text based, and I was reading about there's potential for like images and and video and things like that. That doesn't seem to be as widespread yet, but I imagine that's probably the next iteration of this. While districts and schools and states and the policymakers that be trying to figure out how to manage this, like Claudio said, it's like drinking from a fire hose, and it is consistently changing all the time. The models that we have today are not the same models that we had a month ago and maybe 2 months from that. So I think that's kind of where we are, at least at the moment. I think like more long term, just to piggyback off of what Claudia was talking about as far as like colleges and future career paths. I think we talked about education and educators, their jobs may necessarily being in danger of or at risk due to AI, but there are going to be jobs that are. And, things that people may be studying or have anticipated going to a career path may not be there for them in 5-10 years. If you look at surveys of employers, McKinsey did one, I believe. I'm sure not the only one, but, companies anticipate changing the way they do business because of AI in the next 5-10 years. And so I think, it's going to be really interesting just to see like how people are able to navigate both their, post-secondary journey and what they decide they want to do and study and be, and their work and career journey, and how that changes or how they're able to or being forced to adapt due to AI, which is hard because you don't know what the next 5 to 10 years is really going to look like. So it's hard to plan long term in terms of that. But as teachers and policymakers, helping kids navigate these spaces and setting kids up, setting the playing field for kids and families to navigate. That's going to be something that going to have to figure out. How do you support kids as they navigate their career aspiration and career journeys when you don't really know what the next 5 to 10 years is going to look like?
Yeah. And that's the one thing, just to piggyback on what you guys said, I think that is the one thing I can guarantee for future technology or edutech or even just, AI machine learning trends is that there's going to need to be new jobs surrounding compliance, governance, making sure that things are done in an ethical way. And that's the only thing that I can definitely say will exist, because we'll now have this emergence of careers and roles that are specifically about reviewing what goes out the door as it relates to these technological advances, and making sure that it's, ethical, that it's, equitable, right? And all of those things from a governance perspective.
That it's effective.
And effective, yes. Right. So like all of that, that's the only thing I can guarantee, is that will be the emergence of a new role or I can see chief, intelligence officers now being stood up at a lot of these companies to say, how do we surround this intelligence with the appropriate safeguards, checks and balances before it goes out the door for whatever it is. If it's edutech, if it's, health related technologies, right? Whatever the case is, if you built it using these technological innovations, you need someone also to make sure that they are making sure that it's checked and that it's doing the right things and that it's effectively being reviewed by a board or by a body of people, right?
And if it all falls apart, make sure that people know how to read a map.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I'm scared. I'm so scared right now of all the people. And I've asked a lot of people over the last few years, do you know this? Do you know that? Like young children. And there's a ton there's a lot of stuff. They don't know how to balance a checkbook. They don't even know how to even begin to budget. And I'm like, oh, this is super scary. So yes, when in doubt.
Social media, you've seen the ones where they give kids rotary phones or cassette players.
And they're like,
figure it out.
Well, yes.
How to use it. But it's also so funny that because whenever there's either a really good tweet, or a really bad one, they're like, fire that intern, give that intern a raise, and it's like, these are professional jobs now,
right?
They're social media managers whose job it is
absolutely, and they get paid very well.
They get paid very well, and so it's just and that when we started using Facebook or Twitter or whatever you were using, it was just something for shits and giggles.
Right.
Can I curse on this?
It's okay. We'll blank that out later.
But now it's it's a whole job and industry and millions of dollars that companies invest into social media strategies. And so, I say it to say, that started out as, something that, we did to, network or meet other people at our colleges or whatever.
You talk about showing kids what a cassette is. There's an actual National Teachers Museum in Kansas. I visited once, and they have an Apple with the floppy disks.
Yep.
In the museum.
Yeah.
And so the person who was doing the tour was saying, do you know what this is and how kids today don't know
what this is?
And I said, well, I wouldn't be surprised, right? But they had all these 17th, 18th century school classroom things,
artifacts,
including the paddle with the holes in it.
That's so funny.
And I mean, it reminds you not just about the change, but about how people back then, certainly in the 18th century, 17th or 19th century schools, did what they did with so little.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
I was always proud that, the producer, your husband,
Yes.
learned how to navigate with a Rand McNally map to figure out distance and cities and interstate highways, because I felt it's such a basic skill.
Absolutely.
That, like I said, when you don't have that technology, people are going to need to know something about how the world works.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say, he did a really good job, because Luis is the smartest person I know in terms of like natural, ability to navigate, to figure things out, to build things. Like, so yeah, that's a little plug for my producer, y'all. So. All right. Well, I thank you guys so much for joining me here today.
This was great.
I think we could have a lot of these conversations over the course as things change and, continue to kind of dialogue about this, because it'll be a new frontier in a year where we're looking at what have we seen? What have has policy influenced in this space? And I just think it's a continual conversation that we have. So I'm so happy that you guys were able to join us, and I appreciate you taking a lot of time today to kind of walk through kind of your perspectives and your experiences.
I'd like to come back to talk about what's going to replace AI.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm gonna hold you to that. I think we're gonna have a whole series related to these discussions, because I'm sure once people start asking questions on the comments, you guys are gonna be they're gonna have you guys come back to answer a lot of different conversations.
I wouldn't be surprised if somebody called or contacted you and said, you people are talking about AI. You sound like you're talking about the 2015 version of AI.
Right.
That's all gone.
Right. Nope. This video was outdated and obsolete by the time it hits YouTube. So I don't know.
Oh, I didn't plug. Is it too late to plug?
No, let's plug. Any parting words? That's this section.
So we at Bellwether, I actually just finished working on a project with the team. We're publishing a report on AI and challenges in education. It's going to be called Learning Systems.
Okay. Is it out yet?
End of the month.
Okay.
So,
am I going to get in trouble for anything? Because I got the drop on this interview. This is an exclusive interview. Is there anything that is somebody going to hit me with an NDA violation?
No.
Okay. All right. I'm just making sure.
I mean, it's going to be made public.
Yes, it's public.
Yeah. Okay. I know, but I'm putting out this. I'm probably going to beat this episode out before your report hits. I will take the wind out of the Bellwether sails. Where they heard it here first on Glitch, Grind, Glow. But awesome. That's exciting.
It might be out. So
no, absolutely. So we'll make sure even once it comes out, we'll update all of the episodes so that they have the links to it when it's officially out. So whatever timing, you just send it over to us so that the audience can see. So maybe not at the time that you view this, but we'll make sure we push it out for you guys. All right. Any other parting words? Do you have anything else?
I can't think of any.
Okay.
I think
we covered it all. We covered a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just want to make sure. And that concludes this episode of Glitch, Grind, Glow. Remember, glitches can't stop us. The grind is our strength, and the glow is what sets us apart. So keep hustling, and we'll catch you in the next episode.